Since we started Dying to Tell You over a year ago, I've encountered many healthcare professionals in person and on social media that have listened to the podcast. Often, the story shared on the podcast sparks a memory of a story in their own career that has deeply affected them. As healthcare professionals, our patients are often our greatest teachers. The things we encounter as we care for patients and families from varied backgrounds helps us to expand our minds and breadth of experience, changing the way we practice and sometimes the way we live our lives. I wanted people to have the benefit of hearing some of those life-changing stories, to hear from these people that dedicate their lives to caring for the sick, especially those who care for people at the end of their lives. I wanted Dying to Tell You listeners to hear another perspective. So I've invited some friends to tell some tales about the things they've encountered that have changed their lives. This is Dying to Tell You, the Caring Perspective. Welcome to Dying to Tell You, the Caring Perspective. Today we have with us Lisa Pahl, who is a social worker. Welcome.
Hi, I'm glad to be here, Cody.
So tell us where you are and tell us a little about yourself and how you got into what you do.
Sure. So I am located in Los Angeles, originating from a small farm in northern Michigan. I moved to LA about 22 years ago, and I've been working in hospice about 18 years. I also worked in emergency medicine for 7 years, overlapping that time. And so I've accompanied a lot of people towards end of life and through that journey. I'm also the co-creator of a couple products to help people talk about death and dying. So I do a little bit of macro level in terms of trying to educate the community on how to have these conversations. And then I work half-time currently in hospice, which I love.
Cool.
Yeah.
You're still doing it.
Mm-hmm. Still doing it.
Cool.
Today included.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us after a day of work.
Yeah. It was quite a day. I, as a social worker, we sometimes we are sometimes there when someone takes their last breath. Yeah. And today happened to be one of those days. Oh, wow. And so it's always a little bit more of an intense day when that happens, when you're there in that spiritual and deep moment when someone leaves this world. So it's a good day to have this conversation.
Yeah, good. Well, I always say, I don't always say, but I often say that our patients are our greatest teachers, and we learn so much. I learned so much from the people that I work with in the hospital. And so that's kind of the idea here, is to share a story about somebody that taught you something. So tell us a story.
Sure. So about 5 years into my hospice career, I met a woman who was very independent, as many people are. She didn't want to leave her home. She wanted to keep her 6 dogs with her in her home, and she wanted to make it work. She had limited finances. And so as a social worker, I am helping problem solve, right? What services can she qualify for? What can we do to come up with some creative ways so that she can stay in her house? And through all of that experience, I got to know her, I'll call her Linda, really well. And, there are just people that walk into your life, or you walk into their life, as it was. Right. I knocked on the door. And I felt like each time that I left, she had given me a piece of a nugget to kind of chew on. And one of these big nuggets was her willingness to speak so openly about everything going on. And she not only wanted to talk about the fact that she was going to die, but she had all these questions. And she really wanted to just get into the meat of, what do you think happens after we die? No, I don't want to talk to the chaplain about this. I'm an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe anything happens, but I want to know what you think. And it turned out she was an atheist, but she was an atheist light, as she called herself, because she had some hope that there might be more.
Yeah.
But with her, we had this last conversation when she was very close to the end of her life, and she told me, there's never been anything that I have wanted or that I have achieved that I didn't at first think was the end of my world. That she had had a pretty rough life, and she had time and time again thought that this was going to be the way that kind of what propelled her in a bad direction. And she gained strength from each of those things. And so I see a lot of suffering. And so I never want to say that suffering is worthwhile because of the gains that are given.
Mm.
But the way that Linda talked about how much she's grown through, her son died by suicide. She had all these tragedies, right? And she became involved with a suicide prevention hotline. She did all of these things based on that. And so her message to me, in our time together was, whatever you think is the worst thing probably isn't, and may turn out to be something that changes you forever.
Yeah.
In a positive way, right? So kind of this post-traumatic growth theory, right? That out of tragedy, sometimes good things can come. So that message really has helped me along my life and my career. Watching people die, you can get pretty bummed out. You
It's
know,
a real
Cody.
bummer.
It could be a bummer, and people are devastated, and her words have just continued to help me have faith and confidence that these people I'm supporting are going to be okay. They are going to get through this, even though I see them in that moment of pain and suffering and grief. We are a resilient being. We are. It's remarkable what we can deal with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And the fact that she was so open with me, it really, about her dying process, she was my first patient that I had that was really, that's what she wanted to talk about every time I went there. She didn't want to talk about a book she had read or, her grandkids coming over or her symptoms. She just wanted to get into the meat of it. And in doing that, it got me more comfortable being able to really sit with people in those conversations. Because I think people might be surprised to know that people working in hospice they're not always that great at really talking about the fact that this person's going to die.
Yeah.
We focus a lot on symptom management and, making sure that there's caregiving in place and these tasks. And we don't always stop and pause and say, how are you feeling about your prognosis and the fact that your time is limited?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on for you as you think about that? How are you sleeping at night? Are you wondering what's going to happen after you die?
Yeah.
So she helped teach me how to have those conversations.
I love it. Two things that I really love about this. One, this idea that things can be fine or even great after a difficult experience.
Mm-hmm.
it's I've had some turmoil at work recently with our team, and just hospital got sold or acquired or something. I don't know, merged.
Yeah.
And it's like it's messing up all our stuff. and
Yeah.
and there's a lot of uncertainty. And one of our social workers said she has this mantra that it could be great. It could be
Mm,
great, which is the truth. When there's uncertainty, there's equal chances that it could be terrible and it could be great. And a lot of it has to do with me, right? Like how I'm
yeah.
receiving this and playing the cards I'm dealt. But um,
Mhm.
we suffer a lot in the imagined future, um,
Mm,
and most of those things never happen. Um, But I also really love you calling out the fact that a lot of, even in hospice, a lot of people have a hard time
mhm.
sitting in the uncomfortable space of somebody that's dying and somebody that's
Yeah.
wrestling with the dying process, or the thought of disappearing, from the
Mhm.
earth, or not
Mhm.
existing anymore. And
Mhm.
that's, I think, hard because a lot of us who go into these fields want to be helpers, and we want to make things better. And there's just nothing I can say, nothing I can do that takes away that, right?
No.
They're dying.
Mhm.
What is there to do about that except for
Mhm.
sitting there with them in that question, sitting with them in that uncertainty, letting them have
Mhm.
that experience, allowing the full experience of whatever's happening, not sweeping it under the rug or trying to make it something it's not. And
Yeah.
that's really, it's a great skill to learn, but man, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
Even after all
It's not.
these years, I mean, I still have a hard
Mhm.
time sometimes. I want to make things
Mhm.
better. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I find that I talk to the nurses I work with quite a bit because, my job and your role too is more about talking, right?
Yeah.
And so my role also is some of these tasks, like helping with
Sure.
family leave
Yeah.
and resources and that sort of thing. Um, but our nurses, they spend so much time on symptom management and making sure the patient's comfortable
Mm,
that they don't have a lot of practice with really like having these kind of conversations. And so today I had planned to see this patient when the nurse was there because the patient had a really rough night. And so I went together with or I got there a little after her. And it was clear the patient was actively dying. And I was so glad that I made that judgment call to go today because she's a relatively new hospice
mm,
nurse. And she was sitting with the patient, medicating him, getting him comfortable. But there's a whole room of people that are just
right.
not being tended to,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
He's dying, so she's tending to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing about hospice and the hospital system. Um, when I worked in the ER, I had a whole team of people
Right.
to kind of, get them all in the room and bring out one family member to go with the chaplain and one over here. And but in hospice, we knock on the door and it might be just me, it might be just the nurse. And so today it worked. It worked beautifully because I was able to tend to the family members.
Right.
And then as we saw that he was taking his last breaths, we let the family know and they gathered around the bedside and was able to
Mm,
send him off with beautiful words. And man, it never loses the, the profoundness, you know? Like I said, I've been doing this 18 years and every time I'm in the room that someone dies, it impacts me,
yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I'm sure you've been in the room of many people,
Yeah.
um, as they've taken their last breath. And um, yeah, the energy shift in the room, the way the person looks when they're gone, it really, it's profound. It stays with you.
Yeah. I always love the, well, it feels a little bit like, I've heard people kind of compare it to childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
There's this anticipation that this thing is happening. Often the patient does seem like they're working hard,
Yeah.
and then it happens, and there's this, just this sense of relief, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is often really hard for family to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that they are sad, but they're also so glad that it's done.
Yeah.
And then they feel guilt about that. We've talked about that
Mm-hmm.
before, but it is really impactful to be there for that, and to see those, especially the interactions between family and the person who's dying as that's
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Oh,
It's so, I don't know. It's really a gift. It's not really my space, but I'm there just kind of bearing witness and,
yeah.
participating when I'm called upon to do so. But it's what a gift to be able to witness that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Take me down, hand me over. I know my time has come. Hope is drifting.
I was sharing with the family today. I mean, sometimes you can get despondent about the state of our country and world and things happening. And the news might make you think that people are, I don't know, not caring individuals. But I drive all over LA, and to go into people's homes where they are taking care of each other and loving on each other. And that is, I mean, I love that I get to see that kind of love. Not always. There are situations where that can't happen, or the person themselves was burned bridges and doesn't have people at their bedside, and that happens too. And then in that space, we become the ones to bear witness to those people. I believe everyone deserves to have compassion at the end, regardless of what choices they've made.
I was in the hospital this weekend in the ICU with a patient who was not doing so well. She got a little bit better, but this group of people showed up to be with her, and most of them were not family. They were just close friends, friends for 40 years or whatever. And I told them, I was like, it's my favorite thing when people show up for other people when there's no obligation. That these people didn't have any kind of familial obligation to be there. They just love her. And they don't love her because she was born into the same family. They just love her. And just to show up in this time, just to be there. She didn't know they were there. She was intubated, sedated, but they were there for her. And it's my favorite thing. And I said that it gives me hope. It gives me hope for the world, because I know that there are people, and I think probably most people are, when it comes down to it, pretty excellent. And
I agree.
I really think so.
Because we see people at their worst, right? We see people at these really stressful times, and they rise to it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So what does happen when somebody dies? Do you know?
I've got it all figured out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you saving it for a book, or do you want to tell us?
I don't know. Okay. I mean, obviously I don't know. But my beliefs have changed over the years. When I first started working in hospice, I was pretty I was an atheist. I was raised Catholic. And I that didn't totally align with me. And I kind of generally believed in something, but wasn't sure what. But I didn't necessarily believe in like signs from beyond and all that stuff. But after working around death and dying for all this time and working with bereaved people who have family members, and my father-in-law visited me in a dream, and I absolutely believe that he visited me because of what he said. So I have changed my views. I do think that there are times that people can communicate with us after they're gone, and that may not be. Sometimes that's a dream. Sometimes that's signs of a song, or, I was really trying to get my mother-in-law to tell me what she would come back as. So then we could like agree on it,
Yeah.
But she didn't really want to play that game with me. She was kind of like, I'll be everywhere whenever you think of me, Yeah, but I do think that I definitely think there's something afterwards, whatever that is. In my belief, it's not a heaven that's people are sitting around together. But this gentleman that just died, his mom had, been there the day before, and he had, or 2 days before, when he was still communicating, and he had said, "My mom's here." And as you know, that happens so often. I mean, I think the stats are like 25 to 30% of people comment or, allude to that there's someone. In my experience, it's usually mom, sometimes someone else, but it's often the person's mom that's there to welcome them, is how I look at it. And so, but I don't know if that then means that we're like sitting together having coffee cake or something. I think it's more the idea of the person, or the warmth of the person, or the feeling of the person than the person.
Yeah. Well, I have
What do
my
you think?
hopes. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I too have had experiences. Two different men that died. One was my granddad, and one was a man who was kind of a surrogate grandfather type person. And each of them, the night after they died, I dreamed, and they came to me. And yeah, so was it a dream? Was it them? What's the difference, really? Does it matter?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was comforting at the time. It was really comforting, and so I just try to accept that for what it is. I have my hopes, I hope there's something afterwards, but if there's not, then I won't know. So and probably won't be bothered by it.
Yeah, that's what my atheist patients, I wrote a blog post about this once, and about the comfort that atheists have at end of life, I mean, to me, that's also very comforting. Like blackout, that's it. You have no more struggles of this world.
Yep.
That's some days that seems very appealing.
Yeah. Some days more than others. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, this one woman said to me, I know that I'm going to live on, I know I'm going to live on in my family. I know that they're going to honor me when they are making decisions. They're going to hear my voice. And that's what gives me comfort, is like knowing that I've made an impact, and that they're going to continue on with the relationship with me.
Yeah.
And so I think there's so many ways to think about that. Death feels so final, but we can have ongoing relationships with the people that died.
Yeah.
It's different, it certainly doesn't take away the pain of them not being in the physical world anymore. But my mother-in-law, like, she continues to guide me. I hear her words all the time. She was one of my biggest cheerleaders, and I talk to her all the time. I hear her. That relationship, I find ways to, stay connected to her, reading some of her writings and wearing her perfume or clothes, or, all the things we do to kind of like keep that going, you know?
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you to Linda, whose name is probably
Thank
not
you to
Linda.
Linda. Yeah.
Tell us about your the death deck.
Yeah. So another important patient in my life was Joe. I'm able to say his name because this is part of our story. Joe was in his 40s and he was dying of pancreatic cancer. He, like many people that are young, came onto hospice at the very end of his life. And so I was the social worker for him and his wife, Lori, and their 2 little kids. And so through Joe's dying process, there were a lot of questions over what he would have wanted, how much medication he would want. Would he want to be more sedated, or did he think of this as a spiritual experience? There were differences in opinion in the family about that. There were questions about how involved he would want the kids to be, if he would want the kids to see him at the very end. Questions about the visitors, because there were a lot of people there. And did he want certain people seeing him in that state? And so years later, Lori reached out to me because she was writing a memoir, which, speaking of, is now out next month. But she was writing a memoir. And so we got together and we started talking about how Lori and Joe hadn't had these conversations and how she had had a lot of second guessing in her grief experience and wondering, right? There's so much second guessing in grief,
For sure.
especially when conversations haven't happened, right? So we started talking about how can we help people begin talking about death and dying and what they would want before a medical crisis or a terminal diagnosis begins. Because once you're given a terminal diagnosis, which I just experienced with a friend who is now already dying, and there's not good opportunity, in that
once it's started.
Because it's like treatment. And so how can we help people before that time when we can talk about death in a way that can be a little bit abstract and playful, but get to the meat of people's preferences and their thoughts and beliefs on it? So we developed the Death Deck in 2018, and it uses multiple choice questions and humor to kind of lighten the topic up. So, and then in 2023, we developed the EOL deck, which is our softer version, which is the one I use with my hospice patients to really kind of talk about end-of-life preferences. It's also multiple choice. The tone is casual with like a smidge of sassy grandma, but not really like a ton of humor because it's more sensitive.
Sure.
But yeah, and I have a couple more in the works that I'm working on to try to expand the conversations. But that's working on these projects has really helped me kind of stay in the space because it does get depressing at times, or it gets sad at times, not depressing, but it gets sad. And being in a lot of the sadness comes because people are coming onto hospice so late and we don't have time to support the families. They're like deer in headlights all the time and they don't understand what happened. And so being able to try to, within both decks, we do some education on hospice and palliative care. We try to help people know more about their options and know more so they can be more informed when that time comes. And so that has helped me kind of find meaning in that space.
Right.
And a little bit only half time at the bedside, which is a good combination.
Yeah, I can imagine. Tell people where they can find the Death Deck.
So you can get them both on our website, thedeathdeck.com. The Death Deck is also available on Amazon. The EOL deck is just on our website.
Okay, cool. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. Thank you for joining us on Dying to Tell You the Caring Perspective. Yeah, good job. We did it. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing your story with us on the podcast. I especially appreciate you joining us after a day of patient care. You can find out more about Lisa and the Death Deck at thedeathdeck.com, or you can find a link in the show notes. I have the Death Deck, and I appreciate the sense of humor with which it was created and the lively conversation it sparks. Thank you for listening to The Caring Perspective. Season 3 of Dying to Tell You is well underway. We have several excellent interviews of people living with serious illness already recorded, but we're always looking for more. So if you or a loved one is living with a life-limiting illness, you do have a story to tell. Let's tell that story together. Go to our website, dttypodcast.com, and click the Share Your Story link to get started. Remember, you can watch all episodes of The Caring Perspective on YouTube, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have more guests coming each week with thoughtful stories of hope and learning at the end of life. Thanks again for listening. This is Dying to Tell You, The Caring Perspective.